All right. I fear that we mistimed the Dumb Tree conversation during spring break of SVSU's spring break. But the good news is it's recorded, so we'll make sure all of the students get to it at some point. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Dumb Tree, and if you don't know me, my name is Brent. I'm just love leading y'all. This is super fun. I get to be a part of this. Mazi means together. Mazi means this idea of bringing all the flavors together, and as we think about what that looks like, we're super glad that you're here, bringing your flavor to the world of what we've got going on, and we realize that not everything is going to be in agreement as far as preferences, but this is the way that we'd like to do it. So we're pumped that you're here. Normally we've got about 50 more college students in the room, and with the spring break scenario, that's super cool that they're out doing all the fun things they're going to be doing. And then again, we might actually be like, man, I wish they were here, but we'll worry about that later when we send them the video or whatever that looks like. We've been in a series called Prodigal. So the series about Prodigal is very simple. Everybody in the room at one point in your life, either that's now, you're currently in, or was a moment in your life, have been prodigal. Everybody's been lost. Some of you might be like, honestly, Brent, I don't know if I'm lost or found at this point. And that's fine. We're glad you're here. I mean, if you're going to figure that out, we'd like to figure that out with you. That's something we want to do together. But we started the series and we were talking about the one that got away, where the story that Jesus gives is the shepherd who leaves the 99 and goes after the one. And we thought, the one that got away, and maybe, just maybe, you're part of that story for the one who got away. Maybe you're an active participant in what God is doing in their life by engaging with them through maybe getting a coffee or a lunch, or maybe it's that phone call that you just randomly got and you picked up because, hey, I don't know why they're calling, but here we are. And then last week we talked about the lost coin, that if you lost something and you lost something that was valuable, would you not go nuts to find it? I mean, you would drop everything to find it. And the reason we do that is sometimes we will be late to meetings that are really important if we lose our phone. I mean, it is like, I cannot live without my phone. Back in the day, you forget your phone. It's like, it'll be fine. I actually got two men in my life whom I love who forget their phone all the time, and I can't tell you how frustrating that is when I'm trying to call them. Because they won't pick up the phone that's not in their pocket. And they don't even do the search thing, which is, guys, listen, can you just take your phones with you, the two of you? I don't want to point you both out, but it's like, with that, we had this idea that came from the story in the parable where Jesus is telling this parable. He's like, look, it's like if you had a lost coin and like you found it, would you not invite people to celebrate with you? I mean, would you not be super pumped? And we've all kind of been there. You'd be like, get on the phone and someone's like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? You're like, oh, dude, I found my lost blank, whatever it is. And they're like, I didn't even know that was missing. Why are you telling me this story? Because I got to celebrate. And there's something in us, there's something in you, there's something in me that loves finding lost things. We just love it. And it's just built in there. I mean, I'll go nuts over a Where's Waldo. Like, I love it. I just love it so much. But the point is that we love finding lost things. And that leads us into tonight. And we're going to start the actual prodigal son story. Now, this is a very popular story if you grew up in church at all. If you were raised in church, or maybe you walked through church, you've probably heard this story at one point in time in your life. We're not going to get through the whole story because I like to section it out. We do things called series, which means we do a bunch of different topics talking about one larger topic. And we're utilizing the stories that Jesus did on this prodigal son. So this prodigal series actually gets the name from this moment where we're going to pick up. It's in Luke 15. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and jump into Luke 15. Luke 15, verse 11. Now this is where Jesus has a group of people, and he's sitting with tax collectors and he's sitting with sinners. And it's like the Pharisees, the people who are supposed to point Jesus out, are being like, dude, that dude's sitting with the wrong people. He needs to be sitting with us. And they start murmuring to themselves. Meanwhile, the tax collectors and the sinners, literally quote sinners, which to sin is from the word chata, which means to fall short or miss the mark. So like, we all fit in that. I mean, we all miss the mark all the time, but they would categorize those as less than people. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight and why we do that sometimes. But the point is that Jesus is hanging out with people he came to seek and save. The lost people he came to help find. He's with them in conversation, and the people over here are really fired up that Jesus isn't engaged with them. And so he goes through these couple of stories, and the context is Jesus is in the third story driving home an idea to the sinners and tax collectors while the Pharisees are on the sideline watching this happen, okay? That's the context. Sit in that moment for a minute. Sit in that moment. And this is what Jesus says. Now, Jesus continued. There was a man who had 2 sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, can you give me my shares of the estate?" This would not be abnormal in the world of sonship. This would not be abnormal in this culture. Can you give me my shares of your estate? Can you give me my money? I want my inheritance early so I can go forge my life ahead. So the father, doing what he would do, divided his property between them. Now, as a firstborn son, there was this thing called the birthright. So the firstborn son would get double of the pot than everybody else got, okay? And that's kind of how it is. So if there were 2 boys, he would get 1/3 of his estate. Does that make sense? Because he's not the oldest. The oldest would get 2/3, and the younger brother would get 1/3. I'm a second born, so I feel like I have some things to say about that, but, I didn't write the rules. That's just what it was in the culture. So here we go. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got all he had together, and he set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth with wild living. And when we say wild living, use your imagination. After he spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of the country who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. And in that moment, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. Now we're going to focus on that part of the story. And I want to just, disclaimer, the story's not over. Come back next week. We're continuing the story next week, but I want to focus on this story because we hear this story. There was once this young man, and he had his dad divide up all of the inheritance between him and his older brother. And when he had all that in his bank account, instead of sitting there with his dad and letting it grow over time, he ended up cashing it out and moving on. And he moved to this place that was super far away, and there he started just doling out money and doing parties. He was just living the life, man. The lifestyle that you see on shows and movies, he was just going for it. And actually this young man was going so hard that he ended up running out of money, and in that moment, he lost the job that he had, and he couldn't find one. And he was getting hungry. So he took this job feeding some animals, and he was so hungry he wanted to eat the food that he was feeding to the animals. At what point in that story are you thinking this young man's making a lot of wise decisions? Because if I'm in that story with you, okay, let's say that young man is me. Let's say, guys, listen, I got my dad's money, I went and did my thing, and we were in a conversation, and you're listening to what I'm saying. I'm telling you all these things I'm about to go do, and I'm telling you all these things that I'm about to say. And wouldn't there be a moment in that world where you're just seeing red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, and we as human beings, and maybe you're a better Christian than me, but I probably might just say it out loud, we would look at someone telling us that story, or you've had a friend telling you a story similar, and you have this thought in your mind, and fill in the blank for me. The thought is simply this: how could you be so, thank you, the honest group, stupid? How could you be so dumb? Don't you realize what you're doing? Don't you understand that you're making unwise decisions? Don't you get it? Do you understand what's happening right now? You are literally making every wrong possible decision, and you have no idea. And I like to call that being in the dumb tree. Now, the dumb tree is not a real tree, I think. It's not a real place. But it is a metaphorical place that we have all sat in. And you want to know why I know you sat there? Because you're like, Brent, I never sat in the dump tree. You sat there because everybody in this room at one point in time in their life was prodigal. Everybody in the room. At one point in time, you were lost. Some of you still lost. Some of you still in the dump tree. And you know what the dump tree is? The dump tree is that metaphorical place where you think everything you're doing is a great idea, and you've got great friends in your life that used to talk to you really honestly, and they just kind of stopped texting you back. Or you got parents that are looking at you saying, I can't go with you on this journey. I am done with that. Or the dump tree is that you're in this engagement and you think everything you're doing is really, really good and really, really exciting and really, really fun and really, really important. And then the reality is, if you were to peel that back and tell that story to yourself, you'd be raising the red flag dumb questions. You'd be like, why would you do that? Why would you do this? And here's the idea, here's the thing is, the dump tree is not just like this metaphorical place that we've all sat in or some of us are still in. Hi, you. The dump tree, this is going to happen, team. This is going to be a thing. It's all right. The dump tree is also a space where when you're in the dump tree, and this is the hardest part about being, Riker, can you sit back down, please? I got control of that. That was mine. When you're in the dump tree, the reason it's difficult to be a part of a conversation in the dump tree and have wisdom said to you, the reason it's difficult is, she scared me on that one. The reason it's difficult is because when you're in the dump tree, you think because you are elevated over people that you know better than them. You think that your literal elevation puts you in a position over the people trying to speak wisdom into your life. And this is where the Pharisees are sitting in the beginning of the story. Their whole job is to point out who Jesus is. That's their whole job. They have studied their entire lives. They are the most educated people in the culture, and their whole job is to say when the Messiah shows up, that's him. And yet, Jesus is sitting in front of them, talking to tax collectors and sinners, and in that minute, they're sitting here murmuring, who is this guy? He's not the guy we thought. He's not the guy we saw coming, so he clearly can't fit into, because he doesn't fit the box of the Messiah that we thought was going to be. And you sit in the dump tree. And you sit all up in top, and this is the best part. This is the best part, is some of you like built a fort in the dump tree. How many of you have parents? Throw your hands in the air. Should be about everybody in the room. I don't know if you know how biology works. I'm not explaining that to you. This is why you would get so frustrated with your parents. Because you'd be walking up, you'd be climbing the dump tree, and they're like, please don't go up there. You're like, you guys don't even know me. You never let me have any fun, all these things. And your parents are like, no, it's just that I got a fort up there because I stood in that dump tree for a long time. And where you're going, I've got some advice that you shouldn't go because I'd really rather you not know about that. And so then they try to communicate that to you, and they do it a little too passionately because they really don't want you to be up there. Because the thing that happens if you're in the dump tree and you fall out of the dump tree, you get hurt. Not just that, but you hurt people on the way down. I don't know about y'all, but all of this pushing into the tension of the story and the tension of the series. We have all been in the dump tree. And some of you still are in the dump tree. And the point of bringing up the dump tree is that when we talk about being prodigal, when we talk about being lost, when we talk about being in a scenario where you are the one that God is actively chasing after, what we're talking about is that there is going to be a moment where you're going to have to come to grips with, should I stay up here or should I climb down? And climbing down is embarrassing, and it is uncomfortable, and it is difficult. It is hard to climb down and look at your parents and say, you were right. I should have never gone up there. And what happens in the dumb tree is you climb down and you bring down shame and you bring down guilt, and which guilt is a state of being. It's not a feeling. People are like, do you feel guilty? You are or you're not guilty. Did you do it or did you not do it? That's how it is. But coming with that is shame, right? Coming with that is this feeling in you that's just like, oh, I just feel like I shouldn't have been. Can we just take a minute? And just for a minute, sit down here and say, hey, if you're currently in the dumb tree, would you do us a favor? Would you come on out of that dumb tree? You should climb down. And here's what I'm going to promise you is that I know a guy whose name was Jesus. And Jesus sat with people who lived in the dumb tree. And he asked them to come forward. He shared stories and he helped people understand that what is lost can be found. And what is going on in the world, in your world, while you're driving up that decision, like you can actually fill that with something that's going to drive you towards something better for you for the rest of your life. And Jesus would communicate that story. And here at this church, we understand that some of you are in the dumb tree. And the reason we understand that is because we've been there. And so when you come on down from the dumb tree, what we're not going to do, what we talked about last week, is we're not going to expose you to the light and shine a mag light in your eyes so that it's really painful for you to just move on. We're going to get you out of that tree. We'll probably talk about the story. We might laugh a little bit, but that's just because we're human. And none of you are thinking that's you, but I've had conversations with you. And when we step out of the dumb tree, and we step into the light, and we do that in community, Jesus has an opportunity to do something so amazing in your life. And here's the problem. Here's the tension. Sometimes we like sitting up in the dumb tree more because it's easier to stay up there and blame the circumstances of the dumb tree than to climb down and have consequences to our decisions. It is sometimes easier to sit up there and let the dumb tree be the blame so that we don't have to take ownership of what we did. Let me push into you just a little bit. You are hurting you. You are hurting your families. And you are hurting the people who love you when you stay up in that dumb tree. And the reason I say that is because there are people who really, really, really love you, who want to help you get down out of that thing and want to take a step into the next part of your life. See, this man is sitting here, and not long after he took all of the money and he went off to the distant country, and after he had spent every dollar, not long after he had lost the job and there were no jobs to be had, and there was a severe famine in the whole country, and that he began to be in need. And actually in Proverb, it talks about the wise see danger and seek refuge, but the fool keeps going and suffers for it. So the wise man sees danger and says, let's regroup here. And the fool keeps going and suffers for it. And then it talks about the fool is the person that when they need wisdom, they won't be able to find it because they won't have anybody around them to communicate it. They will have pushed everybody away. And so my push to you is not to get to that position where this man has nothing left. What happened to all of the friends that were at all of the parties that he was at? What happened to all of the friends that were at all the parties that he was paying for? They were his buddies then. Where are they now? He's taking a job in a farm field during the severe famine to feed pigs from some citizen of the country. And he was so hungry, the job didn't even pay well enough that he wanted to eat the food he was feeding to pigs. And without too much, giving away too much for next week, in verse 17, I underline this in my Bible. I'm that kind of person that writes in my Bible, forgive me. When he came to his senses. When he was sitting there and he came to his senses, he got out of the dump tree. And the rest of the story we'll get to next Thursday. We're going to engage in worship, and we're going to engage in a moment here. You guys come up. When you're speaking and engaging in like this, and you're doing a series, you leave things unresolved on purpose. And I do that on purpose because I don't want to resolve it for you. And I'm going to tell you why. I don't want to resolve the tension in your life for you because that's what you have community for. Y'all should be communicating to each other and engaging with each other. And for you younger cats in the room, we do have wiser people in the room that would love to grab coffee or get that breakfast. I will warn you, they wake up earlier than you normally do, but you can do it. They would love to sit with you and engage in that wisdom, and they'd love to tell you how stupid you are and how dumb you're being. And they would love to hear your story and be like, flag, flag, flag. But here's what I know about those people in the room, they will never do that. Just like when Jesus stands in front of the adulterous woman and says, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. This is the best part about being wiser, is you already know you have a prodigal story. And for some of you, you're like doing everything you can. You're spinning your wheels and you're spinning your brain trying to get out of the dumb tree on your own. Would you just please walk up to one of those wiser people and ask for their help or their advice? And when you do sit with them, would you please tell them everything and not think about or pretend like those people don't have a story to tell you too? And when we do that together, I think these tax collectors and sinners were sitting here watching Jesus. And I think they're talking to Jesus and sitting with Jesus, and their minds are blown with a man that has the right answer and has everything they need, but refuses to throw the first stone. And I want you to think about that moment, sitting in the dumb tree, and how much better it would be if you got on out of that thing. Honestly, he'll be up there. No, it's fine. He'll be up there someday. It'll be fine. Imagine a world where we as a church stepped in to help people out. I have this quote. I saw today that I really would love for our church to be like. This is a quote that I just saw on LinkedIn. It just passed through today, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to steal that. An alcoholic friend of Philip Yancey once said to him, when I'm late to church, people turn around and they stare at me with frowns of disapproval. I get the clear message that I'm not as responsible as they are. But when I'm late to AA, the meeting comes to a halt, everyone jumps up to hug me and welcome me. And they realize that my lateness must be a sign that I almost didn't make it. When I show up, it proves that my desperate need for them won over my desperate need for alcohol. Let's make sure that the people know how welcome they are in our presence. That our table is really, really big. And that there's always a place with their name on it at our table. So that when they come on home, we can sit with them again. Imagine a church, imagine a world that was like that. Imagine a world where we already know you're dumb. Because we're dumb too. And imagine a world that our stories, the ones that have some shame and some frustration and probably some anger attached to it. Imagine a world where we have been forgiven for those things. And that's the world that Jesus brought. That's the world he was bringing. And that's the world we're going to be talking about for the next 2 weeks. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for what you've been doing in our lives. Thank you for this church. Thank you for what we've got going on here. God, it's so cool to see people in this room. God, I do pray for the students at SVSU and all the spring breakers and everybody going in and out. Lord, I pray that if they're caught up in the dumb tree or they got any type of conversation happening, that they may be feeling something happened over the week that they wish never did, or maybe they got a friend and they don't know how to talk to. God, would you give them wisdom and discernment? Would you bring them home safely? And when they arrive here, if they do choose to take us up on the offer of sitting with some of our wiser people who may have some stories to tell themselves, God, would you fill that moment and that meeting with your love and your grace? Because I don't know about you, but I know that when I'm convicted, nobody has to teach me that lesson anymore. God, would you help us if there's someone in the room that's in the dumb tree? Would you bring them down and would you bring them home? We pray these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.